Hello my friends! It's been 3 months since I got my Sony A7III, which means that it is a time for a proper long-term review. So in this video, I would like to share my thoughts about A7III after spending a lot of time with this camera and testing it in various situations, and I would also like to talk a bit about the newly announced Nikon Z7 and Z6 mirrorless cameras, and generally my thoughts about Nikon mirrorless system in comparison with Sony A7 series. So first of all, what do I like the most about A7 Mark III? That is quite easy. It is definitely the capabilities of great backside illuminated 24 megapixel full frame sensor and incredible hybrid autofocus system. 3 months later, I am still amazed by raw files, dynamic range and ISO performance of this camera, and this is actually a good case study on why the gear matters, because the amount of data in raw files that the sensor captures has given me a lot of opportunities to create a look that I wanted to achieve in post-production, like for example in this shot taken with Tamron 28-75mm f2.8 and excellent ND 100,000 filter from PolarPro Quartzline, and the dynamic range is truly stunning here. Using ISO 12800 in low light is not a problem either. In some situations, even 25,600 is okay. I still consider 24 megapixels to be the perfect resolution for all-round use, so I have absolutely no complaints about the sensor performance on the A7 Mark III. The autofocus on A7 III is the second outstanding feature. In stills mode, the reliability is great and the subject tracking is so fast that it will not lose the subject no matter how fast you move the camera. It is actually so fast that when I was showcasing it in my review by quickly moving the camera from one direction to the other, some of the viewers were complaining that it makes them sick, and it still kept the focus in a relatively low light indoor situation. It works just as well in video. I have briefly compared it to Canon dual pixel AF in EOS M50, which has the newest Digic 8 processor, so the autofocus should work the best in M50. And I have to say that Sony is significantly better in terms of responsiveness in difficult situations, and it is also much faster. Some of the users were saying that the dual pixel autofocus is smoother in video. In that case, just set the autofocus dry speed to slow and autofocus track sense to responsive, and you will get basically identical autofocus behavior. One more thing that I will put into outstanding bracket is the battery life. It can easily get over 1000 shots in the real world use and over 3 hours of 4K video, which is great, and that is probably all that needs to be said about that. So the sensor, autofocus performance and battery life are 3 outstanding features of the A7 Mark III. Regarding the things that I would put into very good bracket, it would be the build quality and the handling. Finishing is flawless, it feels very dense and solid. The materials are premium, the buttons feel great, and now I also like the controls a lot. It has 3 exposure dials, exposure compensation dial, enough well-positioned custom buttons, the joystick is there as well. The controls are still not as good as on Panasonic, but I can say that the controls are really good. I will also put the video features in very good bracket. I intended to put those into outstanding bracket until I tried 10-bit cinema 4K 150 or 400 megabits video on Panasonic GH5S in combination with Vlog. I didn't care much about the 10-bit in the past, but now that I have tried it, I would really like to have it in the A7 Mark III because it makes a real difference in color grading possibilities, and paired with A7 III sensor it could have been great. I still like the picture profile 8 with gamma change to Cine 4 on Sony cameras. It is still a great camera for video with beautiful 4K picture, great slow motion capabilities, great autofocus in video and so on. But that 10-bit footage from the GH5S has spoiled me a bit. I will also leave a link to my GH5S review in the description. I think that it is my best video so far, so please take a look at that. I will also put the image stabilization in a very good bracket, not necessarily because of the effectivity, but mostly because Sony managed to put the in-body image stabilization in such small full-frame camera, and the effectivity is actually not bad. It still makes a huge difference in comparison with not having stabilization at all. Of course, it can't match the G9 or EM1 Mark II, but it is still great to have it in this package. Now in the July 2018, I also feel like I can put the lens selection into very good bracket. I used the Tamron 28-75mm f2.8 DR3 RXD on this A7 Mark III probably 80% of the time. I use Sony FE 28mm f2 10% of the time, and I am extremely happy with both of these lenses. The Tamron is optically excellent, the autofocus works great. The firmware that fixed autofocus issues in very early copies has also been released, and it is also a budget-friendly way to get that full-frame f2.8 experience, so it might be one of the most important lenses for the whole system. Regarding the FE 28mm f2, I mostly use that for trips and situations where I just want to turn A7 III into a compact camera. This lens is also optically very good, the autofocus works great, so overall I like this one as well. What I miss in the lens selection is a lower end, smaller telephoto lens with slower aperture for people like myself who only shoot telephoto occasionally and who don't want to carry big full frame lens to a trip to use it only a couple of times, which is why I currently shoot telephoto with Micro Four Thirds system. Regarding my good to average bracket, here I would put the screen and the viewfinder. Although the A7 Mark III pricing was quite aggressive, especially in the US, not so much in the Europe, so if Sony had to spare cost somewhere, the viewfinder and screen are reasonable prices to do so in my opinion. Both are still fine to use, the viewfinder is generally good, it is just not one of those super impressive 3.69 million dot viewfinders, but it is completely fine to use, the screen is sufficiently bright, the resolution is average, but it is still usable and most importantly it doesn't dim in 4K. I generally like fully rotatable screens like those on Panasonic cameras, but at the moment I actually think that for this particular camera the tilting screen is more suitable because in certain situations, like for example when you want to use handle on the left side with cage, the rotatable screen can be in the way and it can also be blocked by the strap while shooting at low angles. So I do like both styles. Rotatable screens are well suited for Panasonic in my opinion. On A7 Mark III, I am actually fine with tilting screen. I will also put the SD card options to good bracket because I have invested in expensive UHS-II cards, but I can't set the camera to write simultaneously to both cards because only one slot is UHS-II compatible and UHS-1 slot would slow down UHS-II slot, so I only store JPEGs and video on UHS-1 card. Fortunately, the only things that I've put into bad bracket are software user interface and the absence of in-camera time-lapse feature. The user interface is quite bad, mostly because you can't use touchscreen to navigate the menu. The menu itself is not terrible, there is just a lot of options, but fortunately you have the My Menu tab, which is a huge improvement, but I think that 4th generation of Sony full-frame cameras must have proper touch interface. Overall, I still like my A7 Mark III a lot. It is a great hybrid camera, the sensor performance and the autofocus are the biggest highlights for me. The handling is really good, the in-body image stabilization is also very nice to have. There is still a room for improvement. Now I would really like to see 10-bit video and the user interface is becoming critical in 2018, so we will see what A7S Mark III will bring, but overall I can say that the A7 Mark III hype was very real. But what about the Nikon mirrorless hype? Z6 and Z7 have been announced. Z7 with 45.7 megapixels and 493 focus points. It costs $400 more than A7R Mark III. Z6 has 24.5 megapixels, only 273 autofocus points. It is priced just like A7 Mark III. It seems like Nikon has done most of what I would require. So there is 5-axis in-body image stabilization, there is hybrid autofocus, and it seems like there will be downsampled full sensor readout video of some sort on both. These were the most critical things in my opinion, and on paper it seems like they have done it, and the big surprise is 10-bit video and low profile with external recording. In terms of handling, I don't like a couple of things, like the dial placed in the corner of the camera, which is the only thing that I don't like about otherwise perfect handling on Panasonic G9. I don't like 3 buttons cluttered around the shutter button and 4 buttons closely together in the bottom right corner. I hope that it will be possible to switch AF on and display buttons. And there is also no dial on 4-way pad. And the only thing that I miss on A7 Mark III, which is the dry-walled dial, is missing here as well. There is also no exposure compensation dial. So at the first glance, it actually seems like the physical controls on A7 III are better, which is very surprising to me. But of course, I haven't seen it in person, so maybe I would change my opinion after that. The viewfinder and screen on Z6 and Z7 will be much better than on A7 Mark III, but the menu is carried over from Nikon DSLRs, which is in my opinion at least as bad as Sony menu, but you can at least control it via the touchscreen. Unfortunately, there are also some significant downsides, like that the battery life is only rated for 310 shots, which is less than half compared with A7 Mark III. There is only one card slot and it uses XQD cards, which is a real bummer. The buffer can only take 18 RAW shots on Z7 and 23 on Z6, and even that is 12-bit compressed, and it can only do 5.5 frames per second with automatic exposure. And ironically, the lens selection is now very poor in comparison with Sony, and it will take years until they will match Sony lens selection, and now there are also third-party manufacturers focusing on the E-mount. So at the moment, it seems like a first good step, but I would still very easily choose A7 Mark III over the Z6, although I would like to try the Z7, and I will try to get one for the review, although there is very little chance that it will happen. So that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. I hope that you liked this video and that you found it to be useful. Stay tuned for more videos and maybe consider subscribing if you don't want to miss my future content. I appreciate your feedback in form of thumbs up or thumbs down. If you would like to ask anything or share your opinion, please do so in the comment section, and see you next time.